Chapter 8. All cults are personality cults. All cults are really extensions of whoever the cult leader is. Chris Hedges. El Questro had quite a history. The founder was an Italian who'd been a POW in the war and had found this beautiful neck of WA and decided to start a farm. He also taught primary school to local community children. Like Philippa, he'd invited people to come live and work the property. He was making an ideal community, a utopia, Philippa explained. It was so successful that this El Questro business was born. He also, along with his commune members, started the clothing brand Ringers Western. That brand was huge. It was everywhere. There was a special type of cap that males all wore. It had 2 stripes up the side, similar to the caps that cops wear. Without understanding how ominous this was, I found it ominous anyway. The commune people all work for free, building the brand, but that's how you have to work to get things going, Philippa protested to no one but herself. There was no way I was going to wreck the atmosphere by shouting, "Cult!" Instead, I agreed. She then went on to say that the cult, she didn't use that word of course, adjusted horses on her land. So she was in with them. "Do you know him personally?" I innocently asked. "He's currently serving time in jail. They always do that to the real seers, the visionaries." "Oh, so unfairly incarcerated." I tentatively asked her what his name was again. "Then how do I spell it?" I think I pushed a bit too far. Philippa spelt it out, Salerno, and I caught that his first name was James. I'd be looking that up later when we were back in phone reception and I was away from Philippa. On the way home, she spoke of a rock art site that no one knew of. Philippa had been told about it by her community mates. We stopped in by the side of the road where there was no indication of a road or path. She'd recognised the rock formation that we were heading to. We climbed through the barbed wire fence and walked about 100 metres to the first formation. And she'd found the right place. It was beautiful, like a living room wall covered in paintings with a hearth where so many fires had been burnt. Exquisite. Philippa then pulled a Philippa. She said that she liked to sit quietly and communicate with the elders, so I followed suit. We sat with our eyes closed, and after pretending that I was doing the same as her, I opened mine. I openly, though silently, said to the elders, "Yes, I know I shouldn't be with this woman. Don't judge me. Thanks for having me over uninvited for a cuppa. Your place is really neat." I made a few wishes too, since we were doing something so childish and unproven. I wished for paid work. What the hell, I needed all the help I could find. I'd found a few job ads and rung people. One was for a fertilizer tractor driving job. These ones are way more technical than they sound, and I would so love to learn those skills. It's very computer reliant and you have to be techie, which I was. The combination of driving heavy machinery and using a computer appealed to me so much. I spoke to a gruff woman who said they'd already found someone, but if they didn't accept their offer, she'd get back to me. I was pissed off that the ad was still up, but what can you do? Next, I rung a farm over the road that dealt in seeds and hired tractor drivers. The woman was very nice to me, but she was just reception. I never heard back. I figured it was the wrong time of the year. I should have been just that bit earlier to Mirrawong and I could have had a shot. Or something else. I wondered about the French couple who'd also tried to get work but to no avail. There were so many jobs going that they would have been willing to do, but I wouldn't. No customer service for me ever again. I had a heavy vehicle license. I briefly entertained the thought that maybe Philippa knew more people than she let on, and with this knowledge she was bad-mouthing her free labour so we'd have to stay working. Absolutely nothing was off the table for this woman. We walked around these ancient people's house a bit more. We found ourselves in what I'd describe as a town square. I know it's very Euro-colonizer to describe it in these terms. I was merely imagining this place as busy as a town square with fires, cooking, and this big circle arced by the unique Kimberley rock formations, providing not only a beautiful backdrop but a windbreak, and the huge dancing corroborees that this venue could house. I really didn't care about talking to the elders about my problems. I wanted to know about their lifestyle here in this place with so much residual energy We even found the water source, a spring slowly leaking out of the rocks, so much safer than camping by a riverbank that could flood in the wet and had crocs. On the way back into town, we stopped into one of the communities on the outskirts of town to see one of Philippa's mates. I'm sure she would have been wanting to tell her about our visit to a sacred site, to gain cred. To me, it's kind of the opposite. If one of them had taken us, I would have felt better, plus been able to share my theory on what areas were used for what. Her mate wasn't home. Instead, we got mobbed by so many little dogs, terriers of all variety. I figured she must have been older, little dog age. Older women get small dogs because they're easier to look after and aren't aggressive. She'd bred them to make a little army. I loved this. I'm not a fan of having dogs for company and security. Community dogs are different. They have their own lives and do their own thing. And people on community have their own lives and do their own thing. I really like the atmosphere of communities. I visited one halfway up Cape York in North Queensland with a friend who'd lived there in the 90s. There are social problems in communities, sure. My mate was known there, so there were no issues. The casual way of life without the strict rules to make your house and yard look neat so as not to upset the neighbours didn't apply here. And people definitely were house proud. Those who couldn't go to that effort because of their own issues weren't treated the way they would have been in predominantly white towns and cities. Communities felt like another country. You even saw this difference in the dogs. We went for an evening walk while there. There was a community worker who came with us. She was in a wheelchair and she'd feed the dogs on her way to the community centre. They'd spread the word, so naturally every few metres or so we'd pick up another following dog. There ended up being quite a pack, weaving around us, some up front like a security detail, escorting us around their property. They would chill, no aggression. Interestingly, the only aggression was from dogs in yards. Those fences made the dogs act similarly to suburban dogs. They barked their hearts out with fear and a sense of duty to their owners. Our dogs weren't stray. They were all in their own large yard, the whole community. A police Land Cruiser pulled up beside us. The copper thought we were travellers, tourists, backpackers even, and warned us about walking around the community at night. My mate explained that she was part of this community since the 90s. The arts worker in the chair was also part of the community through working here. She was safe, whether my mate had been there or not. I needn't have worried, but I piped up just in case I should have been. I'm more worried about this pack of dogs following us. The copper didn't affirm my fears. He drove off, leaving us with the dogs. It was all a new experience for me, especially when both women advised, "Don't be scared, they'll smell it." Oh, great. Try not being scared when someone tells you not to. I was okay, we were okay, and the dogs were okay. Nothing like women's energy to calm the situation down. On another community visit, a weekend away on beautiful Palm Island, staying with a friend who was a teacher there, proved the same thing. The dogs weren't roaming as much, and we walked to a breathtaking Melaleuca swamp in the centre of the island. Old cars rolled past us on the way there. I admitted to my fears of people this time, to my friend. She assured me that we were safe. I'm the teacher, no one's going to mess with us. If you were on your own, that's a different story. You can't deny that communities aren't dangerous, but they are merely protecting themselves. If they weren't dangerous for strangers, this place would be overcrowded with tourists. Fishermen would be pulling up on the shores like Captain Cook. Because cops wouldn't stop tourists from coming here, the community had to do its own policing. I didn't say it's good policing. It's a reaction to the situation they find themselves in. And there were stray animals on that island that surprised me in their behaviour. As I stood on my friend's accommodation veranda, I saw a beautiful shirtless young man in his 20s, galloping along the street bareback on a community horse. I expressed my surprise to my friend and she replied, "Oh yeah, it's like a David Lynch movie around here." Who wouldn't want to live in a David Lynch movie? Never boring, although Twin Peaks is. I said that it'd be fun to just grab a nearby horse and go for a ride. She explained that you can't just do this. They're all owned by people, even though they're not fenced in. What a great life for these horses. And she said the only thing to worry about with horses was to do with the ungelded stallions. Again, lucky animals not having to be castrated. If you walk around while on your period, the stallions smell the female hormone and you could end up with one trying to mount you. Crikey, I didn't even know stallions did that. If it didn't kill you, it'd certainly break a spine or something. What a terrible way to go. Still, I like that humans had to adjust their behaviour for the animals, not the other way around, which is normally the case. Fenced in and castrated. I know it's de rigueur and the only way to have animals. Doesn't mean it's right. The majority is wrong while the minority is right. I'm no crazy animal rights defender believing that they deserve better treatment than humans. It's just a theory I've arrived at later in life, particularly after growing up on a cattle station and castrating, dehorning, branding and pushing them through steel yards that are terrifying for these poor gentle creatures. Their fears are justified as they end up getting eaten. Philippa was planning a party on the upcoming Saturday night to celebrate her 50th birthday. I really wasn't looking forward to it, but I had no choice. She needed to go to the bottle shop and put in her order for the grog. It's not a case of the bottle shop having to order it in because we were in a remote community. It was because there were alcohol purchase limits, since there were communities all around. I fully approved of this situation. It should be in effect all over Australia. And the limits were huge. A carton of mid-strength a day. If you're consuming that, you've got more problems than grog limits. Grey nomads and blokey camping trip bogans hated it naturally because they couldn't take stacks of cartons out bush. This made me love it more. For parties, you just gave them a day's notice and they approved it anyway. I'm sure that rule only applied for non-community people though. Philippa also wanted to stop into the pub for a drink. I could tell she missed doing those kinds of normal things because of the attitude towards her. I agreed because what else was I going to do? I still like going to pubs though. I drank non-alcoholic beer like a dry drunk. There was a brand that made alcoholic beer with a different coloured fish on it depending on its strength and variety. The non-alc one was blue, so I would ask for a blue fish at the bar. I was glad to find out the nickname of this drink. Very bush-like to give something like that a nickname. She must have tired of my company by now because we sat on our phones. It wasn't social. We were just like a pair of alkies getting our dose on, consuming our dopamine in other ways until the beer kicked in. I'd already had a night at the pub and it was so very different to this. It was more of a dinner than a night out, and it was basically a lifesaver. Some travellers on the Solo Women's Camping FB page were travelling through Mirrawong. They'd shouted out to anyone who wanted to show up and have dinner. I love this group so much. You could do things like that and not worry too much about whoever showed up might be dodgy or just bad company. When you exclude males, life gets easier. We all managed to find each other even though we didn't know what we looked like. There were 2 women passing through, not together but going in opposite directions. They were lovely company. I really appreciated them. Another 2 women showed up also, but they weren't travelling. They lived and worked in Mirrawong, both separated and single, and finally having the freedom to go caravanning on their own terms. They were worth their weight in gold. I didn't mean to commandeer the conversation, but it ended up that way. I could not take advantage of this very supportive group of women. The care was in the air. I first asked if the 2 women, one working in the council and the other working for a government department, knew Philippa. I didn't want to talk openly about her if they were friends with her. Philippa was right in that town folks didn't really accept her. When I told the table of my worries that she was trying to be a cult leader, the local women concurred. They had indeed heard some funny things about Philippa. They also knew all about the Salerno cult, and that provided a very interesting convo topic for quite a while. Oh, the value of local knowledge. The 2 travelling women must have wondered what type of town they'd ended up in. I was glad to get the word out about Philippa too, even though they were self-sufficient and didn't have to do labour in exchange for accommodation. I got really animated with this table of women, all hanging on my every word. I told them about Philippa's New Earth ethos. This place isn't the New Earth. It's not even a fucking permaculture farm. It's an illegal caravan park, bitch. Everyone laughed hard. It just felt so good to be getting my power back after Philippa had drained a fair bit of it prior to the birthday outing in her bad attitude towards me. I also fired up again when I explained that Philippa thinks that women are too far away from their femininity and it's making males confused and worthless since they're not being the provider and protector anymore. Listen, woman, you do all sorts of farm shit on your property. Ride motorcycles, build fences, tend cattle. You're being unfeminine too by your own calculations, you hypocrite. I must have sounded comedic enough because no one felt uncomfortable about my outbursts. They just found them funny. I was finally around my tribe. I'd never repeat anything I said to Philippa, of course. Interestingly, the woman employed at council said that they were aware of the illegal caravan park status of Mirror Glen. The town needed accommodations, so they left it alone. I didn't want to dob Philippa into council, and I didn't need to. Her crimes were more bullying poor travellers who had no other option on a comm. A bad review on the farm labour site would fuck with her income and make her think twice. But let's face it, I wouldn't do that either, because she'd just counter it with lies and I wouldn't be accepted with other hosts. If I ever chose to do this again, that is. Both women were concerned that I was staying at Philippa's and said to reach out if things got too bad. Man, I was grateful for that. It was just a relief to offload about the drama of the place. Part of me was quite excited, though, to be watching the inner workings of a wannabe cult leader who was in with a real cult. I listened to podcasts, watched series, loved anything to do with exploring cults. I think it's because I know we're all susceptible to them. A great post on Insta springs to mind. Kyle Prue, who wrote the book How to Piss Off Men, he's one of the good ones, joined a cult for laughs with his brother. When they left, he said they ganged up on them and said some hurtful things. It was hard to take because the cult had started off very charming to them. Cult 101. Kyle said he'd often ask his brother when he spoke to him, "Do you still miss the cult?" They both did, which gave them more laughs. This is how to treat cults. Defensive humour. Both women had had reason to visit the Salerno cult here in Mirrawong. Apparently there are heaps of kids all running around, and there are indeed a lot of weird people. This is typical. They think differently, if you could describe it as thinking. The women wear long skirts and are submissive trad wives. That's quite shocking for us free women living in a democracy. Yuck. We got back from Philippa's birthday celebrations, in which I was the only party guest, and I was free for the rest of the day. Because Philippa had had a few, I drove her back. This kind of annoyed me and I was nervous as I drove under her watchful eye. Luckily I could drive stick very well. I showered, lay in bed. I was now on the cruiser since Connie and Al had left. There'd been a farewell communal dinner last night. It was pretty weird though. The departing French couple were both extremely quiet. In hindsight, I wondered if they'd been kicked out so I could have their comm. Who'd know with this bitch? I made a big fuss of them anyway, as I could feel that they were sad. Honestly, they were better off out of this place. I would probably go too, but I had other issues. Van issues. When I got my van serviced in Mount Isa, they found I had leaky shocks. This should have been an easy fix. I sent my model and make off to my fantastic mechanic in Sydney. He specialised in Iveco vans and had a main line to Italy for parts. On my lap around, I'd had some mechanics at a truck place question some repairs on the van. The question was whether they'd been done properly or not. I know what they were insinuating. A mechanic could have ripped me off because I was a woman and they do that kind of thing. It sucks that people jump to that conclusion, because it's often true, like seeing a woman with a black eye and assuming that a male did it. We lived in an exploitative male world. Not this time for once. I told them that it was Con in Sydney who'd done it. Oh, that guy that imports parts. They all knew him wherever I went, and they knew not to question his work. Con and his wife were my age, Greek, and because of my cultural ambiguity, assumed I was Southern Euro too. I didn't tell them any different. I just enjoyed belonging in their demographic. Con was letting me down this one time though. He couldn't find shockies for my model. He said to take the van to a local mechanic and get them to take them off, measure them, photograph them, and he'd be able to make a match. Getting into a mechanic here was near impossible. Most were booked up for weeks ahead because of all the dry season tourists here with their well-worn four-wheel drives. I could still drive the van, but if I was to try and make it back to Canberra, it'd be risky. The brake pad warn light had recently come on also. I was stuck at Mirror While doing all my online catching up, now that I was back in reception, I looked up James Salerno. I was presented with some heavy shit. I figured he was jailed for white-collar crime like tax evasion or some shit. This man was serving 10 years for the sexual abuse of a minor, a teenage girl who belonged to one of the families in the cult. I really don't know why I was shocked. All male cult leaders eventually take the power to their heads, well, their little heads, and wield power in a sexually aggressive way over the women who are easy targets due to the submission required of them. Fuck that guy, and fuck Philippa. They rarely make a sexual abuse case stick, and particularly since his daughter was a solicitor and they owned a legal firm, and he was wealthy, there must have been overwhelming evidence. This was real, and the way he was busted was a documentary maker had been shadowing him and checking out his businesses in both Mirrawong and the Adelaide Hills. No surprises there were wealthy pedophiles in Adelaide. It's that kind of place. I suddenly felt a bit unsafe. What kind of person was Philippa? I'd had enough red flags. She must have been naive to believe the innocence of this man. That was typical cults. Maybe she was in his also, as a satellite member who was allowed to operate outside the group. I could not imagine her forking out money to something as non-beneficial to a person as cult tithes. It's so ironic that cult leaders and wannabes in her case are the least likely to join a cult. So she admired this man as more of a mentor, I guess. She didn't worship him though. She just wanted to have his business acumen. The thing is, she already did. She and her husband had run a business in Sydney. Her father had been a good businessman. I could only guess at what a corrupt prick he was for Philippa to have turned out how she did. There was really nothing to admire about this woman. The more I learned, the less I wanted to be there. And there was this fucking party going on tonight. We, of course, had to work to get the place ready. I managed to skip out of it, although I did have to greet some elders who'd shown up early and wanted to camp down by the river, Philip's special river camp. Whoever had been suckered into building the beautiful little donga kitchen, the huge awning that gave shade, and another little shady spot that was thatched with palm leaves, a massive job, had really worked their guts out to do this. And us lowly free labourers and renters weren't allowed to camp there. She had to let the elders camp there since her whole thing was about being part of their mob. It would have been an absolutely hilarious clash of wills. Tight-fisted, ungenerous Philippa, who would have had to provide some kind of money, grog, accommodation, lifts, whatever, in order to be accepted by the mob. They didn't just befriend white people because they liked them. And why should they? Watching someone like Philippa have prime real estate in what was effectively their town, I silently cheered on these elders as they tried to make a longer stay out of a one-night party invite.